there. So I'll double click and it inserts a chart for us. Okay, lots to see on the screen. We can see the data sheet. You should never close the data sheet, and I'll show you why. If we click to close that and then click away from the chart as though we'd finished editing it, you probably know already that in order to re-edit the chart, to go back in and make changes, we double click on the chart, and oh dear, the datasheet view hasn't appeared. That's because we closed it earlier, so I can click on View, Datasheet to get it back again. So it's best not to close that down. Just click away and then double click again, it reappears. You're probably already aware that you can make changes to the data and it automatically updates the information in the chart, and you can also change the information for the labeling as well. Probably already aware of that. One of the areas that people tend to get wrong is when they're deleting the data. If they don't want the fourth quarter, for example, then they tend to click into those cells and delete the information, and there the information's gone from the chart. But you can see this big gap here, so that's not a very good way to do it. You're far better using the column selector, or the row selector if it's the series you want to get rid of, but the column selector as I've clicked, and then pressing the delete key, and it gets rid of the placeholder for that information, and it makes the chart a lot easier to see. So use the column titles rather than the individual cells. We'll now have a look at the toolbar that appears when you work with a chart. Okay, when I've got my chart selected, I can use the toolbar to select various parts of that chart. So for example, let's select the legend, and that selects the legend over the right hand side, and with that object selected, we can make various changes to the font style and size, the normal kind of formatting activities. Perhaps we can choose a label and make those a little bit bigger. Okay. I said you don't need to use a toolbar. You can simply select on these areas, make the changes that you want to make that way. We'll have a look at changing the style of chart. Here we've got a column chart, and again I'm using the toolbar, but you could use the chart menu. I'm using the toolbar, and we can change the style of chart, perhaps to a bar chart or line chart. Put it back to how it was. But you can also do that with the individual series. So for example, if I just select the South series, we've done that there, the South series, then because that series is selected, if I make a change now, it applies to just that series. So I've changed the South to a line. And the next thing I want to look at is the gap between the columns. Again, you can select this in any number of ways. You can select a series and right click on it and do format, or you can use the toolbar and use the format data series there, or you can simply double click on the chart and it brings up the format data series dialog box. Part of this I'm going to look at first is the options tab at the right hand side, where we can work with overlap and gap. If I change the overlap figures, you can see what happens in the preview window at the bottom. The series that I'm working with, the South series, is overlapping itself with the other series. And then looking at the gap width, that alters the gap between the individual columns of that series. So if I decrease the gap between the columns of that series, then the barring effect gets thicker, and I can increase it as well. Click on OK to see the effect of that, and we can see in the main window there that the South series is now overlapping the other series. We can also format the various parts of the chart. Again, I've got the series selected there, so I'll work with that for now. For colours, so I'm going to use the Format Data Series button, and this time come back to the Patterns tab, and from there we can make changes to the colour of the series, and we can decide what kind of border we want to apply to it as well. Here we are. I'm going to select another series and show you that we can also use a fill effects, which brings up the usual culprit, where we can alter the gradients and have one or two colours, textures, patterns. We've been through this a few times before. And also pictures, where we can select a picture off the computer and it inserts that into our series. What you can also do, if you've got an image already on your presentation, such as this picture of the children here, we can copy this and go back into our chart editing and paste, and it puts that picture into the chart series. Again, I only had one column selected there, which is why it only pasted into one. So you have to be careful there. If I click once on the South series, you can see it puts a dot in all the columns. That shows the whole series is selected. But if I click again, then the dots in the other columns disappear and I've just got this one column selected. So just be careful what you're working with at any time. If you want the whole series selected, a single click. The next thing we can do is alter the values on the scales. We've got a scale here of 0 to 250. So I'm going to select the value axis and then go into the formatting of the dialog box. First thing we can look at is on the Patterns tab, where we can adjust the ticks. The ticks are the little lines that are appearing next to the numbers. And you can choose whether to have them or not. And it's just a question of clicking in these boxes to choose the styles that you like, or whether you want any at all. It's playing around, clicking on OK, having a look to see what that does. Don't like that. Undo it if you need to. Going back into formatting that. The next part we can have a look at is the scale, and you can see the scale goes from 0 to 250. Look at the chart, 0 to 250, and it picks that up from the data in your datasheet view. But we can see the lowest value is actually 27, and it only goes up as far as 200. So we can make changes here. I can make the minimum value 25 and the maximum value 200, and then I can choose what steps to go up in. So I want to go up in steps of 25 perhaps, and the minor units can be 5. It's just trying to decide how you want your chart to appear. Display units as, that is really helpful if you're working with big numbers. If I chose thousands, for example, then what happens is the computer divides all my numbers by 1,000 and then puts the word thousands next to it. We'll have a look and see what it looks like. And then OK. And you can see it's divided the numbers by 1,000 and put the number thousands there. I don't like that for this particular chart, so we'll go back into it and get rid of that thousands. I don't like that. OK, that looks better. You can see now the scale starts from 25 to 200 and in the steps that I chose. Let's bring up the dialog box again for formatting and seeing what else is on there. Remember, always look around. Don't just wait and think, nobody's told me about that. Look at every tab, look at every option in it and have a play around. If you have a look at the font tab, no surprises there. We can make changes to the font style and size and colours, superscript, strike through. You can make the choices. The number tab, how do you want your numbers to appear? Perhaps you want to make them currency with no decimal places, or perhaps you want to put a 1,000 separator in. Playing around, seeing what these things do. And finally the alignment. Let's alter the alignment. That's the direction the text will be. We can either use the button at the bottom or we can click and drag the effect that we want. So there you can see I've dialed up displaying the numbers as currency and put a 45-degree angle on them.